let's look at determinants of demand and the impact those have on markets. Before we do that, let's refresh from a previous presentation that shows a movement along the demand curve. It's important to remember that price is the only thing that can lead to a movement along the demand curve, meaning that if the price of a product changes, for example here, price increasing to price 1 or a higher price, quantity demanded for the product decreases. So again, in this particular instance, the price of the product changes, so the quantity demanded of the product changes. However, there are other circumstances where the price of a product does not change, but the quantity demanded will still change, and that's because of a shift in the demand curve, a shift in the willingness and ability of consumers to purchase a product without the price of the product in question actually changing. Let's talk about these other determinants of demand. So let's look at the factors, the determinants that could impact the demand of a product and the quantity demanded of the product without price of the product changing. The first is consumer income. So let's say that consumer income in a given area increases. For most products, almost all of them, demand will also increase, and we illustrate that by shifting the curve to the right. Other products can also have an impact on demand for the product. Substitutes are products that are used interchangeably, and if the price of a substitute goes up, then demand of the initial product will go up and we'll see a shift to the right. As an example, if the price of, let's say, iPhones goes up, then the quantity demanded for iPhones will go down. But if the quantity demanded for iPhones goes down, then the demand for Android phones will go up. So we shift to the right the demand curve for Android phones, and that will lead to an increase in QD even while price stays the same at P. Also, complements have an impact on the demand for a product. Let's use ice cream and ice cream cones. If the price of ice cream goes up, then the quantity demanded for ice cream will go down. Also, the demand for ice cream cones will go down, so we shift the demand curve to the left to show that while price can stay at P for the ice cream cone, if we shift demand to the left, then quantity demanded will decrease from QD to QD1 to the left. Style, taste, popularity, all the same word essentially, but if a product becomes less popular, then demand for that product will decrease. It will shift to the left. And again, in this example, that doesn't say that the price of the product will change because it becomes less popular. In fact, if the price of the product stays the same as the product becomes less popular, then there will be less demand for the product. Seasonal changes, demographic or population changes, the people who are buying the product, and income distribution, which is closely linked to consumer income, can all impact demand and lead to shifts of the demand curve. Let's look at this with diagrams. So here we have an equilibrium diagram, demand and supply, creating an equilibrium price and an equilibrium quantity. And so let's just say this is the market for a particular item. And let's say for whatever reason the demand for this item increases. Maybe consumer income goes up, maybe the price of complements goes down, maybe the price of substitutes goes up, maybe simply popularity of the product increases. So demand for the product increases. Well, what should happen is the price of the product should go up from PE to PE1, go to the new market clearing price, the new equilibrium price, and eventually that will probably happen, especially in markets where the producers have very little control, so perfect competition. In those markets, producers just have to change their price to respond to the market. But in other markets like monopolistic competition, oligopolies, or monopolies where the producers have a lot of control, they can decide what happens. So in fact, while price maybe should go to PE1, the producers don't know to instantly change the price. And so what happens is if price stays at PE even after the shift, well, look here, ignore the original demand curve. After a shift happens, it means that there was an initial demand and now there's a new demand. So once there's a new demand, the old demand is just there for reference sake. Let's ignore that curve, and you can see that if price stays at the original PE, then quantity supplied will be lower than quantity demanded. If price goes up to the new equilibrium price, then that gets rid of that. But We're saying here, let's say for example, price does not go up right away, then we can see that there is excess demand because quantity demand is greater than quantity supply if the price stays at the original PE after the shift. Now you're not going to draw that on a diagram. In fact, this is really the diagram you're going to end up with. You show the shift, you extend that PE line over a little bit to show the wedge that represents excess demand, and now the question is, what can a firm do after there's an increase in demand for their product? What can the firm do to address that excess demand? Now, here's one of these times where if we take a step away from economics, it makes a lot of sense what the firm could do. If a firm sees that people want their product more, their options are pretty simple. They can increase the price, or they can increase supply. Or they can wait it out because maybe that uptick in demand is just a short-term uptick. Let's talk about those three solutions using diagrams because common sense brings us to those three solutions. So let's say demand for a product increases and firms want to charge more money. Look at that. Now, here's the new equilibrium I drew before. You can see that prices are going up here. The total amount of the product being sold goes up as well, taking advantage of that new demand. So by increasing the price, they are more willing, the firms are willing to provide more of the product than they used to. And so we have a new equilibrium where the firm is now selling at a higher price and able to sell more because it all started from the increased demand. This is only possible because now consumers demand the product more than they ever had in the past. What else could the firms do? Maybe they decide it's not worth increasing the price. Maybe they have a particularly PED elastic product, and we'll talk about that later. When a product is PED elastic, raising the price is not always the best option. So the firm looks at its capital, its factors of production, and determines that, we can increase supply of the product. We can easily, relatively speaking, shift supply of the product to the right. We can keep our prices low at the original PE where they were before this increase in demand, and now we could sell a lot more of the product. Look, they could sell more here. Pay attention to QE1 compared to this QE1. By increasing the price, they could only slightly increase the quantity being sold in the market compared to here. If they increase supply, they can keep prices low and they can sell a lot more. Of course, the question is, do they want to keep prices there and sell more, or do they want to increase prices a little bit and sell maybe a little less but sell them at a higher price? It depends on price elasticity of demand. A final option for the firms is to look at the situation and say, okay, maybe this increase in demand is due, for example, to a holiday spending, and maybe the product is becoming more popular as the holidays approach. Well, come January or February after the holiday season, this uptick in demand will go away, and at that point, notice that little arrow there, demand will shift back to the original demand. And so while we could increase the price or we could increase supply, if we just wait it out, maybe 6 months from now, the market goes back to equilibrium and it wasn't worth taking advantage of that excess demand. That's a little risky because to not take advantage of the excess demand is kind of foolish. That means people are clamoring for your product and you're not necessarily producing it, but you may not want to, for example, build new factories to increase supply if you're not positive that the demand is going to stay high. So your options again are increase the price, but that will maybe not allow you to sell as much as you could have if you increase supply. The problem with increasing supply is, are you able to with cost of factors of production having to be considered, or wait it out, but you don't want to wait it out and find out that the demand stays high and you didn't take advantage of it, and all that time you could have been making higher profits. Another thing that could happen is a decrease in demand. Again, using the examples from earlier, maybe consumer income goes down, maybe the price of substitutes goes down, maybe the price of complements goes up, maybe the popularity of a product goes down. Whatever the case may be, this is a problem because now the quantity demanded at that price at PE, if it stays there, is lower than the initial QE. See how QD is lower than QE? That means that if prices stay at PE, then the quantity demanded for the product is going to go down and you'll only be able to sell that much of the product. So firms are going to want to act because of this excess supply that exists if prices stay at PE. So how to get rid of that? Well, one thing that the firms can do is they could decrease their prices. And if I go back to that last slide, look at QD. Look how that jumps up to QE1. So you'll actually be able to sell a few more products by lowering the prices. But maybe the firms don't want to lower the prices. Maybe, for example, if they lower prices, they won't be able to produce the products because of the cost of factors of production. Or maybe looking at PED, they determine it to be a bad idea to lower prices because maybe they have a PED inelastic product and they'll make less revenues. So another option that they have is to find a way to lower supply. If that firm produces 2 items, for example, they can decrease the supply of this product if it allows them to save on the cost of factors of production and maybe use that productive capability to produce a more profitable product. And so here you can see prices stay at PE, but the total quantity being sold is reduced. So if I look at this last solution, look at QE1, the problem with decreasing supply is, yeah, you keep prices higher, but notice that the quantity sold is significantly lower. But now you're selling at a higher price and you're using that productive capability that you saved to maybe produce something else. Another option for the firms is to try to get that demand to increase. And how can you increase that demand? You can advertise. The problem with advertising, which will return you to the initial equilibrium and get rid of this whole shift, the problem with advertising is it's costly, it may not work, although when it does work, it proves to be very effective and it can help restore your market to equilibrium. One final solution is to just wait it out. Maybe this downtick in demand is just to some short-term bad publicity, or maybe it's because of some natural disaster that it made people unable to buy your product. Something that eventually will naturally remedy might be out of your control. If you wait it out, demand should naturally return back to the original D at some point, and the market will go back to equilibrium. So when demand decreases, the options for the firms are many. They can decrease their prices, decrease the amount of the product that they supply. They could try to advertise to return to equilibrium, or they could wait it out. Each of those, you have to consider a variety of factors such as price elasticity of demand, your ability to decrease supply, the cost of advertising, or the risk of just waiting it out and not adjusting. And in the process, all these, if you wait for any of these, you have excess supply. It means you're constantly producing more than the market is selling. And especially if you have a perishable product, excess supply is not good, because if you overproduce, you're going to drive your prices even lower, or you might have product that spoils that you won't be able to sell at all. So that is a wrap-up of how determinants of demand can lead to a shift of demand to the right or the left, and how that can lead to important decisions for firms. Now remember one final thing as we wrap this up, that determinants of demand are all factors other than price that impact demand. Price will impact quantity of demand by moving along the demand curve, but it's all these other determinants such as income, popularity, substitutes, population changes that shift the demand curve and require firms to make a decision about what they will do next.